Welcome to this week's episode of the Modern Mentor Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Cooke. Today I'll be sharing my favorite strategies for keeping my confidence up when I'm speaking or presenting remotely. Snakes and roller coasters. These are the literal things of my nightmares. Slimy, slithery, twisty, loopy. These adjectives for me represent the fastest path to cold sweats. But for the majority of people, the most fear-inducing idea of all is speaking or presenting publicly. In fact, the National Institute of Mental Health reports that public speaking anxiety, known as glossophobia, affects about 73% of us. I'm one of the lucky ones who's never really feared public speaking. But we've been presenting remotely these past several months, and it's made me realize just how many tricks and tools that have enabled me to speak confidently in public are no longer available to me. Things like stages, microphones, and being physically present with an audience or team, not to mention professional childcare, have all served me well as a speaker. And now, like many, I'm finding myself presenting regularly by way of a variety of virtual meeting platforms. The game has really changed. I've heard from several listeners that presenting remotely with confidence, whether to your team, your company, a client, or a prospective employer, has become a challenge. So today, I'll share a set of tips I've picked up in recent months, and I hope you find them as useful as I have. Start by setting yourself up for success. If you're still working remotely, as much of the American workforce is, there's a lot about your setting you can't control. You may be in a tiny apartment in a city full of background noise, or in a big house full of children and animals. And those are realities it's pretty hard to change. But within the confines of any situation, you can do some things to dial up that professionalism factor and boost your confidence in the process. Here's where I like to focus. First, look at your internet connection. I don't know much about technology, but I do know that certain spots in my house offer me a more stable connection than others. So when I'm presenting anything, I claim an internet-stable room ahead of time, giving my family the heads up to steer clear for that hour. Next, check out your physical environment. No one expects you to repaint or refurnish a room, but do your best to declutter whatever is behind you so the visual chaos doesn't become a distraction for your team or audience. If you can point your camera toward a blank wall, great. And if not, you might consider playing with virtual backgrounds just to mask the scene behind you. Next, check your wardrobe. Chances are your audience will only be seeing you from the shoulders up. And yes, in March, I was rocking presentations in my jammies. But by April, I had realized that putting on my grown-up pants made a big difference. Putting on work clothes and even shoes reminds me to sit up a little straighter and put my professional hat firmly on. And finally, lights, camera, action matter. There are a lot of videos out there showing you how to position your camera and even offering up some lighting tricks. In short, you want your camera slightly above eye level. I prop my laptop up on some books. And you want lighting behind your computer pointing at you. I use just a simple desk lamp. Knowing you've got the basics under control will help your confidence soar. Once you've set yourself up for success, now think about managing expectations. While I take care to set the scene and remind my family to steer clear, things somehow manage to happen. By things, I mean dogs and kids primarily, but also doorbells and lawnmowers and what have you. All I can say here is please don't sweat this. If you allow yourself to be anxious about what could happen to interrupt the presentation, your audience will sense that you're distracted. So be upfront about it. Even make a joke. I tell my clients at the start of each meeting that there have been some recent complaints filed about my colleagues in this co-working space, but thus far management has been slow to respond. Okay, it's not hilarious, but it is lightly humorous, and it's my way of saying, hey, I've done my best to clear the room, but things may happen, and let's move on. Stating the worst-case scenario out loud gives you permission to stop fearing it. Less fear equals more confidence. Next, keep your audience front and center. No matter how you slice it, data tells us that virtual calls and meetings are more energy draining than in-person ones. This isn't permission to skip them or shy away, but it should remind you to keep your presentations as short as you can in service of achieving your objective. So what is your objective? Last week in my town, the school board hosted a meeting to present the very long-awaited school reopening plan for the fall. Hundreds of anxious parents dialed in, hungry for details. And the presenter spent 28 minutes up front delivering a lesson that could have been titled The History of COVID-19. I understand that it might have felt important to the presenter to start with a justification for their decisions, but parents weren't there to hear about the realities of coronavirus. We just wanted to learn how the school would approach our children's education this fall. The presenter's long-winded wind-up left people feeling frustrated, angry, and anxious. The board didn't seek my feedback, so I didn't offer it. But I do invite you to learn a lesson from their mistake. Be thoughtful about what your audience needs. Design your talking points and flow in a way that gets them to that finish line quickly. Next, maximize engagement. Let's face it, virtual meetings create a lot of temptation for multitasking. I'm guilty of it too when I'm not the one driving. So take steps to keep your audience participating as much as possible. Don't call out individuals by putting them on the spot, but do address people by name when you're raising a question or a point that might resonate with them specifically. Further, invest in learning the ins and outs of whatever platform you're using. Many of them, Zoom, Google Meet, WebEx, offer capabilities like chat, hand raising, polling, and whiteboarding, all of which can help you shift the balance away from you lecturing to an environment where your audience is actually participating, asking and answering questions, having small group discussions, voting on possible outcomes, and more. The more people are able to participate, the more engaged your audience will be. And the more engaged they are, the more confident you'll feel. And finally, own the virtual advantage. While presenting virtually has its challenges, don't overlook the advantages it offers. When you're presenting live, there is little room for hiding tricks up your sleeve. But in the confines of your home office or closet, you have access to space that those in your virtual audience can't see. This space is perfect for hiding some tricks. Here are just a couple I've picked up. The first is called the bird's tail. It's a term coined by Whitespace at Work founder Juliette Funt. She writes a series of words or phrases on small Post-it notes, all designed to capture the flow of a conversation. And she posts them around the outside of her computer screen like a flower. Posting notes can serve as a mini teleprompter, and having them there can help reduce some of the pressure around remembering everything you wanted to say. The beauty of it is that you're the only one who can see these notes. And next, keep a browser open. When I'm presenting via Zoom or Meets, I'll often have a few additional windows up in my browser. These may include pages I want to be able to reference during my presentation, or even a couple of LinkedIn profiles in case I want to reference details about somebody in the meeting. It's a strategy that keeps me feeling more informed and prepared. And there you have it. Whether you're leading a conversation of two, pitching to a persnickety client, or gearing up to drop insight and inspiration on a virtual crowd of hundreds, I hope you feel ready to take it on with grace. Do you have a question I can answer? Send it my way. Check out the links in my bio for all the ways you can reach me. Or you can check out my website at leadabovenoise.com. You can also follow me on the Modern Mentor podcast page on LinkedIn, where I post additional content and video you'll only find there. Join me next week for a conversation with the former Chief Ethics Officer of Airbnb as we talk about intentional integrity. Until then, thanks so much for listening and have a successful week. Modern Mentor is produced by Dan Firebend, edited by Karen Hertzberg, and supported by the rest of the Quick and Dirty Tips team, which includes Michelle Margulis, Morgan Ratner, Emily Miller, and our Vice President of Podcasting, Kathy Doyle.